Tonight, we journey into the shadows, unraveling stories of terrifying encounters with entities from realms beyond. If you think you're brave enough, join us as we delve into accounts that defy logic and chill the soul. But beware! Each tale serves as a haunting reminder that some doors should remain closed. Title: Silent Whispers in the Dark. The story opens with Marcus Hayes, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for handling cold cases, arriving in the quiet town of Deerwood. The town is surrounded by dense woods and has a stillness that feels almost unnatural. Marcus is here due to a series of unsolved disappearances that have unnerved the community. He immediately notices a strange sense of avoidance in the locals. People glance at him with wary eyes, mothers pull their children close, and casual conversation stops as he walks past. During his first night in Deerwood, Marcus stays at a small bed and breakfast run by an elderly woman, Mrs. Alder. She's kind but evasive, changing the subject whenever he brings up the recent disappearances. He begins feeling watched and finds subtle signs in his room that suggest someone else has been there before him. Small, unnoticed details like an oddly placed chair or faint footprints near the window. His unease grows as he realizes the people here may know more than they're willing to reveal. The following day, Marcus interviews several townsfolk who knew the missing individuals. Their responses are vague and guarded. Some dismiss the disappearances as people moving away, while others suggest natural dangers in the woods. A young waitress at a diner, Sarah, reluctantly admits she once saw a man wandering near the forest's edge late at night before he vanished. Her description hints at something unusual, a strange, almost mesmerized expression on his face. Determined to investigate further, Marcus hikes into the forest, following what he thinks might be trails used by the missing individuals. After hours of searching, he stumbles upon an abandoned, half-buried bunker. The entrance is concealed under thick vines and debris, as if deliberately hidden. Inside, Marcus finds a grim scene. Personal belongings from the missing people, strewn around as if they had been gathered in a rush. A chilling smell of rot lingers, and there are dark stains on the floor. The sight is haunting, especially as he realizes that these items were likely kept here intentionally, hinting at some sinister purpose. Returning to town with evidence, Marcus tries to contact his department for backup but finds his calls disrupted, the line filled with static. That night, he feels a presence in his room. Subtle signs like an open window he remembers closing, or the sensation of cold air despite the heater being on. Mrs. Alder denies any issues, but Marcus can't shake the feeling that he's not alone. At one point, he wakes to find muddy footprints leading from the door to his bed and back out again. One night, a stranger knocks on Marcus's door. The man introduces himself as Garrett, a former Deerwood resident who fled the town years ago. He warns Marcus to leave, claiming the disappearances are linked to an old, unspoken tradition in Deerwood. Garrett's tone is filled with fear, his eyes constantly darting toward the windows. He suggests that Marcus should not trust anyone, not even the police, and insists that some kind of dangerous ritual is at play. Garrett's paranoia rubs off on Marcus, further unsettling him as he tries to piece together the scattered clues. Marcus decides to follow up on Garrett's claims. His research uncovers a handful of historical records, hidden away in the town library, of similar disappearances dating back decades. The records are scarce, but they reveal a pattern. Every few years, people vanish without a trace. He also finds cryptic journal entries from a local historian, who hints at a binding pact that keeps the town safe but at a horrifying cost. Investigating the woods again, Marcus stumbles upon an open grave hidden among the trees. Inside, he finds several recent bodies, horribly mutilated, their faces twisted in expressions of terror. The grisly discovery horrifies him but also confirms his suspicion that these are more than mere disappearances. This is the gross-out moment, a raw, terrifying realization of the brutality that lingers in Deerwood's shadows. Marcus takes his findings to the town's sheriff, who seems unusually indifferent and dismissive. The sheriff implies that it's better for everyone if Marcus moves on, and his calm yet threatening demeanor suggests he knows more than he lets on. This fuels Marcus's resolve, as he realizes the danger is closer than he thought. He begins feeling like he's being followed, even seeing fleeting shadows out of the corner of his eye. The townspeople grow colder, and even Mrs. Alder subtly encourages Marcus to leave. Late one night, he senses movement outside his room. He peers through the window and sees townsfolk gathered in the distance, their faces obscured but turned in his direction. The unsettling feeling of being observed weighs heavily on him, and he starts questioning his own sanity, wondering if the paranoia is getting to him or if he is truly in danger. While combing through the historian's journal, Marcus pieces together that Deerwood may be bound to a ritualistic practice, a dark pact meant to protect the town at the cost of certain lives. Each disappearance is part of this twisted agreement, a sacrificial act to ward off some unseen threat. He suspects that his presence in the town threatens to disrupt this ritual, putting him at risk of becoming the next sacrifice. As he decides to confront Garrett again, he finds himself lured to an abandoned house under false pretenses. Once inside, the door locks behind him, and he realizes too late that he's walked into a trap. The walls are covered in cryptic symbols and photographs of the missing. Flickering candles cast shadows that seem to watch him, adding to the terrifying isolation. He hears footsteps approaching but finds no exit. The story ends with Marcus trapped, hearing whispers from the shadows. He realizes with chilling clarity that he's been targeted as the next victim. The walls seem to close in, his heartbeat pounds, and the lights flicker out, leaving him in total darkness with nothing but the sound of his own breath, and another, sinister breath right behind him. The story begins right where part 1 left off, with Marcus trapped in the eerie, candlelit house, realizing he's been targeted as a sacrifice. As footsteps approach from outside, he frantically searches for a way out. He finds a loose floorboard, which leads him to a small crawl space, and he barely escapes as he hears people entering the room behind him. He crawls through the narrow passage until he emerges on the opposite side of the house, stumbling into the night. Shaken, bruised, and exhausted, Marcus retreats to the bed and breakfast, trying to piece together who might be part of the conspiracy. At the bed and breakfast, Marcus can barely sleep. The images of the trap in the abandoned house haunt him, along with the knowledge that he's being watched. Mrs. Alder brings him breakfast the next morning, noticing his haggard appearance, and gives him a piece of advice. Not all secrets are meant to be unearthed. Her words linger in his mind, deepening his suspicion that she, and perhaps many others, are involved. Still shaken, Marcus decides to confront Garrett again. He follows a tip that leads him to a cabin near the outskirts of town. When he arrives, Garrett is reluctant to talk, his hands trembling as he nervously peeks out of the window. Garrett reveals more disturbing details. Deerwood has a history of townsfolk going missing every few years, and anyone who gets too close to uncovering the truth often leaves unexpectedly. Garrett confesses that he barely escaped the town years ago, but returned to try to make amends by helping Marcus expose the truth. Garrett produces an old, faded document that he's kept hidden, a ledger of sorts that records each of the town's disappearances, dating back to the early 1900s. The entries detail the names, ages, and descriptions of each person, eerily precise and marked with red ink. Marcus notices that each name is crossed out except for the most recent entries, which include the people he's been investigating, and his own name at the bottom highlighted ominously. Just as they're discussing the ledger, Marcus hears a car pulling up outside. Peeking through a slit in the window, they see the sheriff's car idling nearby. Garrett whispers in terror that someone must have followed Marcus. They extinguish the lights and crouch in silence, hearts pounding, as they hear footsteps approaching the cabin. Eventually, the footsteps fade, but Garrett warns Marcus not to trust anyone. The town's eyes are everywhere, he whispers, sending chills down Marcus's spine. The next day, Marcus decides to lay low and watch the townspeople more carefully. He observes small, strange behaviors. A man who seems to be following him through the grocery store, Mrs. Alder speaking in hushed tones with someone outside his window, and a police officer watching him from across the street. Marcus feels surrounded, with no one to trust, but he is resolute in his mission to uncover the truth. On his way back to his room, he notices strange symbols scratched onto lampposts and buildings around town. The symbols are subtle but repeated in various places, and when he compares them to Garrett's ledger, he sees they match symbols next to the names of certain townsfolk, as if marking those chosen for some purpose. The realization is chilling. It suggests that these people may be targeted for something far darker than he initially suspected. Marcus encounters an elderly woman named Judith who is willing to speak with him. She tells him that her brother vanished decades ago under circumstances strikingly similar to those of the recent disappearances. Judith is cagey, clearly afraid of someone listening in, but her words imply that the town's protective forces require sacrifices. She hints at an unspoken rule that the townsfolk understand but dare not discuss openly. Judith points Marcus to an old cemetery on the outskirts of town, suggesting he visit it at midnight to find the final piece of the puzzle. When Marcus arrives, he finds a hidden path lined with more symbols and marked graves of those who disappeared over the years. These graves aren't traditional. Rather, they are shallow and without headstones, as if meant to be hidden. As he moves through the cemetery, he hears faint voices in the distance and realizes he's not alone. Marcus hides as a group of people, including the sheriff and other townsfolk, enter the cemetery carrying candles. He watches in silence as they gather around a freshly dug grave and murmur something he can't quite make out. Marcus holds his breath, terrified but unable to look away, as he realizes they are performing a ritual to mark the next victim. He sees them placing personal belongings, items he recognizes from the missing individuals, around the grave. Feeling cornered, Marcus confronts the sheriff the next day in public, hoping the setting will force honesty. The sheriff remains tight-lipped but warns Marcus with chilling composure, saying that the town's way of life is none of his business. He hints that Marcus has stayed too long, and that it would be wise for him to leave immediately. Marcus recognizes the threat, realizing that the town would rather eliminate him than let him expose their secrets. Marcus rushes to Garrett's cabin, only to find it abandoned and ransacked. Garrett's belongings are strewn everywhere, and there's a pool of blood near the door, suggesting a struggle. Frantic, Marcus searches the area but finds no sign of his friend. He fears Garrett has been taken by the townspeople as punishment for helping him. This incident cements Marcus's determination to reveal the truth, even if it means putting his own life in jeopardy. Following his suspicions, Marcus searches the old library for any hidden rooms or compartments. In a forgotten corner, he stumbles upon a trapdoor leading to an underground chamber. Inside, he finds documents and artifacts that piece together the town's dark history. Details about the binding pact that Deerwood made long ago to protect its people by sacrificing outsiders. He sees photos of past victims, their terrified expressions preserved, and realizes that each disappearance was meticulously planned. At the heart of the chamber, Marcus finds the final entry in the ledger, with his name and a date marked for the coming week. This chilling discovery cements his understanding. He is the town's next intended sacrifice, marked from the moment he arrived. Determined to escape and expose the town's secrets, Marcus makes plans to leave, but as he exits the chamber, he hears a loud noise from above. Footsteps echo down the staircase, and he realizes he's trapped. The last scene closes with Marcus, heart pounding, as he braces himself for a confrontation, unsure if he'll make it out alive. The story picks up with Marcus trapped in the underground chamber after discovering his name on the final ledger entry, marking him as the town's next victim. Hearing footsteps above, he quickly hides, clutching a heavy object in case he needs to defend himself. The footsteps stop at the entrance, but the door doesn't open. After a tense silence, Marcus realizes he's alone. He seizes the opportunity to climb out of the chamber and makes a break for his car, parked near the bed and breakfast. As he drives out of town, he notices something unsettling. His phone has no signal, and a strange, heavy mist begins to settle around the road, making visibility poor. When he finally reaches the main road out of Deerwood, he sees a barricade manned by 2 officers. They calmly tell him the road is closed due to maintenance. Frustrated, Marcus tries to argue, but the officers insist he turn back. Their cold, knowing gazes make it clear that this was no ordinary roadblock. It was set up just for him. Realizing he has no choice but to stay in town a little longer, Marcus returns to the bed and breakfast, his mind racing. Mrs. Alder greets him with her usual calm demeanor, but Marcus notices a glint of something in her eyes, a flicker of recognition that she knows he tried to leave. Unable to contain his frustration, he confronts her, demanding to know what's really going on in Deerwood. Mrs. Alder does not deny his accusations. Instead, she offers him tea and sits across from him, explaining in an eerily composed tone that Deerwood has its unique ways of protecting its residents. She admits the townsfolk have certain rituals to ensure peace and prosperity. When Marcus presses her, she reveals that the sacrifices were chosen based on the individual's suitability for the ritual. A vague explanation that leaves Marcus deeply unnerved. She warns him once again to let things be if he wants to survive his stay. After their unsettling conversation, Marcus returns to his room, feeling watched from every angle. Small sounds, creaking floorboards, whispering voices, shadows passing under his door, heighten his anxiety. He checks every lock and window, feeling as though he's a prisoner, his nerves frayed from constant fear and lack of sleep. The next day, Marcus visits the library, hoping to find information about Deerwood's history. He encounters Anna, the town librarian, who hesitantly agrees to help him. Unlike the others, Anna seems genuinely sympathetic and scared. In hushed tones, she tells him she has lived in Deerwood her whole life and has long suspected something sinister about the town's history, but has been too afraid to investigate. Anna leads Marcus to a restricted section in the library, where they find old newspaper clippings, records of unexplained deaths, and missing person cases that were never properly investigated. Some articles hint at a series of events stretching back over a century, where newcomers to Deerwood mysteriously disappeared. Among the files, they find references to the ledger Marcus had seen with Garrett, solidifying his theory that the town has been orchestrating these disappearances systematically. Anna suggests they gather as much evidence as possible and get it out of town, though she warns Marcus that Deerwood's authorities keep a close watch on anyone who tries to uncover the truth. Together, they devise a plan to sneak out of town by avoiding main roads and using an old trail Anna recalls from her childhood. Marcus returns to the bed and breakfast to prepare for the escape, checking that he has all his evidence and packing light to avoid suspicion. As he's gathering his things, he realizes that his room has been searched. Items are subtly out of place, and the folder of evidence he had collected is gone. Panicking, he wonders if Anna might have betrayed him, but his gut tells him it's the townspeople closing in on him. Leaving the bed and breakfast that night, Marcus notices a figure following him from a distance. He quickens his pace, weaving through side streets and trying to lose his tail, but each time he thinks he's safe, he spots another figure lurking in the shadows. It dawns on him that the entire town may be in on this, watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake. As Marcus reaches the meeting spot he agreed on with Anna, he's shocked to see Garrett waiting there. Garrett's face is bruised and bloodied, and he looks at Marcus with a mixture of fear and anger. Garrett accuses Marcus of bringing unwanted attention to him, claiming the townspeople threatened his family if he didn't cooperate. Before Marcus can respond, Garrett pulls a knife, and a brief struggle ensues. Garrett is subdued, but not before leaving Marcus with a chilling warning. You can't win against them. They'll come for you just like they did for me. Shaken but undeterred, Marcus presses on to the trail, his heart pounding with fear and determination. The path is dark, overgrown, and treacherous, making every step difficult. The eerie silence and shadows around him heighten his anxiety, creating an oppressive atmosphere as he navigates the trail. Strange noises echo in the distance, and he begins to feel as though he's being watched from the woods. Suddenly, Marcus hears footsteps behind him, and he turns to see Anna, looking disheveled and out of breath. She tells him she's been followed too, and the two continue along the path together. However, as they move deeper into the woods, Marcus begins to notice inconsistencies in her story. When he confronts her, she reveals that the townsfolk blackmailed her into leading him back to the main road, where they were planning to capture him. Realizing the betrayal, Marcus runs through the woods, adrenaline pumping as he hears voices and footsteps closing in. Branches claw at his face, and he stumbles multiple times, barely managing to stay on his feet. He finally reaches a hidden clearing, exhausted and out of breath, only to find a group of townsfolk waiting for him. They corner him, and the sheriff steps forward, calmly explaining that he has one final chance to leave town if he gives up his investigation. Reluctantly, Marcus agrees to the sheriff's terms, realizing he has no other option if he wants to survive. The sheriff orders him to hand over all the evidence he's collected. Marcus watches helplessly as the townspeople destroy the documents, erasing any proof he had of their sinister practices. His anger and frustration boil over, but he knows that resistance would be fatal. The sheriff and a few townspeople drive Marcus out of Deerwood, ensuring he doesn't attempt to return. He's left at a gas station just outside the town's boundary, shaken and defeated. The sheriff's parting words echo in his mind. Deerwood protects its own. You were never one of us. As Marcus watches the town disappear in the distance, he realizes he may never have the evidence to expose Deerwood's dark secrets. But his desire for justice hasn't faded. He contemplates his next steps, wondering how he might find a way to return one day and finish what he started. The part concludes with Marcus deciding to regroup and plan his next move, determined to one day uncover Deerwood's secrets once and for all.